Welcome in, Loons fans, to another edition of the Matchday preview. Jonathan Harrison here, joined once again by Manny Lagos. Manny, how are we doing today? We got to talk about a loss, which is disappointing and especially frustrating considering what was at stake for the Loons at the weekend. We'll get to that in a little bit. Plenty of action to discuss, but how are you doing today?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a theme of we got to look back and then we look forward. And I'm kind of caught between the two things where we're still recovering from a tough loss, a game that I think on paper probably should have won. And we get a great opponent to see if we can recover from, one of our tougher outings, I think, of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's welcome in our guest this week from the Pioneer Press, Andy Greder, a busy man this time of the year. Gophers football starting up, covering the Loons as well for the Pioneer Press. Andy, how you doing on this Wednesday?
Like you said, busy, but happy to be here.
More
Yeah.
importantly, Andy, what is going on with Tottenham?
They're going to play in the Super Cup here. Get another
Do they have
trophy here
enough
today
players to
against
field for
PSG.
they have enough players to field for the game?
I don't know, man. It's been kind of slow, so we'll see if they can add some more here. But yeah, it's just typical Tottenham. It's like you get to Champions League and then you don't spend any money. Yeah, I just don't. It's one of those things where you're elated and then quickly brought back down to earth.
And obviously, there is a connection now with Son being sold to LAFC.
Hmm?
Big that was a big transfer, by the way. Big, a lot of money actually. So
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Plenty to discuss. Premier League's opening or starting this weekend. Looking forward to the return of that. You guys have all your Premier League fantasy lineup set. You're ready to go for the weekend. You're ready to go and just sit on the couch to start your Saturday and Sunday mornings now, Manny?
I'm pretty lame. I am in a fantasy league. I just do the auto and kind of like see where it goes. But it's true. I don't have a favorite team. I'm Minnesota through and through, all sports, all teams. Um, so my Premier League kind of watching is just based on enjoyment of high level soccer.
Yeah. Andy, your fantasy team ready to go? You play
You know what?
Premier League
I
fantasy?
I am not in fantasy. I do fantasy American football. That's
Okay.
kind of as far as I go when it comes to the fantasy world.
I don't dabble too much. I am in a friends league, but my team is literally just called Set and Forget because as I follow the motto, I set my team at the beginning of the year, completely forget it exists after week one because most of the time, the past couple seasons, the team that I root for has not been great. So I've checked out on other teams quite early on. So following fantasy has not been really the greatest for me the past couple seasons, but we'll jump into that. Let's actually start there. Fantasy or Premier League starting this weekend. We'll get to the MLS action. What's the game that you're looking forward to the most, Manny, this weekend as the
Oh,
Premier League
I,
returns?
I haven't looked at the fixtures yet. Funny enough, I've been more following the Wrexham and the Coxa stories 'cause I've been watching those on Netflix. So I've already seen Wrexham have some dramatic losses and a dramatic win yesterday.
Oh,
Give me a good fixture, then or two or three, and I'll tell you which one I like the best.
let me pull up the fixture list. I know the one that I'm going to be watching, Manchester United Arsenal, which I'm dreading that because it's the beginning of Manchester United season. We'll see how they do after what was an unfortunate season last year. We've got in the primetime slots starting Friday night, Liverpool taking on Bournemouth. Defending champions Liverpool there. Wolves, Man City tomorrow, 11:30. Aston Villa, Newcastle at 6:30 tomorrow morning. Andy's Tottenham taking on Burnley at 9. Sunday, Chelsea versus Crystal Palace, Nottingham Forest versus Brentford, and Man United versus Arsenal, to name just some of the fixtures for the
Yeah,
weekend.
I mean, you just said it. Then that's pretty. If I'm being respectfully, that's not the most exciting fixture list. I think it is exciting for teams that like the big clubs in England. Certainly trying to see if last year was like an aberration for Man City. Are they back to kind of one of the top two or three teams in the Premier League? Certainly, I think everybody's going to keep their eyes on Chelsea because they're such a wild card in terms of just how well they did in the Club World Cup and how their roster is kind of all over the place. But it's now looking like it's making a little more sense. So I think that's intriguing. But you're right. I think Arsenal Manchester United is probably the game of the weekend.
Andy, how confident are you in your Tottenham side going into the season?
Not very. I think when you when you have a new team, a new coach, new players, a new captain, the fact that they finished, with a record number of losses last year, I think it's difficult to come in with a whole lot of confidence. But I like what Thomas Frank did with Brentford, so I'm hopefully optimistic, I guess I would say.
Who do you guys have? Uh, just early predictions, obviously, to start the season. Who's your top four at the end of the season? Who are you guys predicting?
Ooh,
Manny, I'll start with you.
uh, I think you're probably going to go with Liverpool is the favorite. I think then after that, obviously, a lot of people pick Arsenal. I think Arsenal has to get it done this year. I think it's a big year for Mikel Arteta. I don't, if they don't win, I think they'll be, ironically, even though they've done so well, they've just had a couple years where they should have won. He might be in trouble if they don't win. But so I'll put them in the top four. Uh, I think you throw Chelsea in there based on just the amount of players they have and the trajectory they're going. Oh, that four spot's a tough one. It's not going to be Manchester United. I'll tell you that.
I'm not expecting it to be
I
them
think
to
it's
be
got to
anywhere
be
near
Man
that.
City is
Yeah.
in there. So
Yeah, I think City has a bounce back. I think City probably finishes higher to me, but we'll
yeah,
see.
My question is, how much do we think the Club World Cup run for City and Chelsea will affect them this season? Not having as long of a off or summer off as other teams, because felt like as soon as the Club World Cup ended, preseason friendlies were already starting for a lot of teams across the globe. So it feels like some of those players for some of those teams didn't really get a summer off. They've been in action since basically the end of the Premier League season. Do we expect that to affect them this season, Manny?
uh, it's hard to say. I think for Chelsea it was a really good thing. I think they probably feel like they're excited about needing that tournament to remind themselves that they might be one of the more elite clubs in the world. And obviously, again, they won a pretty big tournament that was new. So I think it probably helped them. It usually hurts individual players, and then it's up to the clubs and the teams to manage their rosters. And we're talking about these big clubs; they do have really big rosters. So I don't love the excuses as much. It's because it's the smaller clubs that I think really struggle when they get stretched thin. So for me, I'm cautious to make those excuses for these big clubs that have so much money.
Yeah, and so many players on the roster, as
Yes.
you mentioned,
Yeah.
Chelsea does. They feels like they've got two, three separate teams that they could field week in and week out. Andy, what's your expectation? What's a reasonable expectation for Tottenham this year, finishing wise?
I'd probably say in like the 6 to 8 range, just be enough to be interesting. But
Just not be in the relegation battle like last
not,
year?
not get it
Tottenham being
done.
Tottenham was Andy saying right there. That's his answer.
Yeah, just typical. Well, I got a question for you guys. Do PSR rules matter? Is that a real thing, or is that just do we just make that up as we go?
Taking a
It's
shot at
not.
Manchester United here?
Yeah, it is because look at I was reading an athletic article yesterday, and just one indication they've spent according to this is 197 million pounds and have sold zero point 0. Just
With sell-on
one
clauses,
indication,
you're
and
ditching Rashford's contract.
this is after people were getting laid off left and right and
Yeah.
didn't know where the money was going to come from, and then they spent 200 million pounds.
Admittedly, it does not look great in that aspect, and I'm not a fan of that for sure. Uh, from what I've understood in podcasts and things that I've read, uh, it's sell-on clauses from some of the guys that they previously sold who moved this offseason. I'm thinking about, I'm blanking on the name again. The right back that just went to Real Madrid. He used to be a Manchester United player. It's Anthony Elanga who went to Newcastle. You also lose the contracts of some of the guys that walked in or you didn't pick up their contract. They became free agents in the offseason. So you ditch some of those expensive contracts. Rashford off to Barcelona. So you get off of his contract. So there's a lot of money that got freed up contracts wise, more so than uh I guess in the transfer budget. And they moved that towards the transfer budget is what I'm understanding from some of the podcasts that I listen to. So
Yeah, I think that's a long-winded answer saying if you can figure out a way to break the rules,
yeah,
teams
absolutely.
like I just you're right, Andy. It's crazy, and I
It's
think there's
taken
a
me
hard
by surprise
hierarchy.
as a Manchester United fan and how they've been able to spend as much as they have. Because I felt when they got Mbumo and Cunha, that was it. Because those were two expensive signings, and then all of a sudden, Sheshko comes in and like, where did this money come from? I didn't expect this.
Yeah.
When I went to Goodison Park 2 years ago, there was when they were getting docked. I think it was what 10 points at the time, and they handed out this sign. All of the fans did, and they held them up before the game, which I thought was pretty funny.
That's
Just kind
amazing.
take a shot at what a lot of people think are kind of a corrupt league.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where the money's coming from for sure. Let's jump into MLS action. Plenty to discuss, and this will eventually obviously loop into the Loons Colorado match. Let's jump into the Eastern Conference side of things. Charlotte upsetting Cincinnati, Manny, this weekend. 1-0 win for Charlotte as Cincinnati tries to look to continue their pace at the top of the Eastern Conference, but falling this weekend in a bit of a surprise result there, Manny.
Yeah, it was. I we've talked about it a lot this year. I do think the East is stronger than the West, and I think it's stronger in a sense that teams are really pushing each other. Once a team starts to kind of look like they're going to be the team that's going to be in the East, these other teams come in and just really kind of remind people that that is a really competitive division. I think Charlotte's still only in seventh place in that conference, so big win for them. Big red card in that game, some big drama. Certainly, I think Orlando result was the one for me that piqued my interest. On both from a team level, they look really hot. They look strong. They look different than they have in past years, in that they now have, I think, a little bit more, not just like the gritty fightiness, but quality. And I think Ojeda, from an individual standpoint, now officially has to be in the MVP race. I mean, his goal chance created numbers are through the roof, and beating Miami without Messi, but beating them 4-1, I think was a statement. It put him in the top four. It looks like the battle for the best team in Florida is not quite written yet.
I'm just going to say, once you can beat Miami 4-1 with Messi on the team, then you can talk.
Okay,
Well,
let's go.
They also had a 3-1 win against Columbus too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
This is
yeah.
a Colorado team that is very, or not a Colorado, an Orlando team that is very good this season and rightfully deserves to be talked about among the better teams in the Eastern Conference, Andy.
I think so. They've got identical record to Minnesota, but to their credit, have been able to beat some of the teams above them in the standings,
Ooh,
unlike Minnesota.
ooh, oh.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. Going back to Charlotte quickly, we'll get back into the Orlando conversation. Charlotte, Wilfred Zaha scoring in the 85th minute. Manny, has that been a success there? They're only down in seventh place in the Eastern Conference, a competitive East. But I mean, you look at the amount of points that they're out of a top four place. It's just 3 points. So they're right there in the pecking order and in the Eastern Conference as well, despite I guess standings wise not looking like it. But has that been a success for Charlotte getting Zaha in this offseason?
I think it's still in that neutral, but it's like neutral to yes, and I think that comes down to Dean Smith. I still think Zaha's mentality when he first came was a little bit soft in terms of really understanding the physicality and the work rate needed to kind of be a winger in this league. And he seems to have kind of just getting him better and better. And then obviously the big goal this weekend just starts to remind yourself that you need that quality, like Charlotte, to really win, especially in the East. And he's got that. So for me, it feels like he's got a player that can be very dangerous if he's hungry around playoff time.
Yeah, it's a player that I like seeing in this league and like seeing moves like that going to get players like that. So I've been excited to see him and how he's played 7 goals, 5 assists on the season for Charlotte this season. Seventh place, just 3 points out of fourth place in the Eastern Conference. So still battling it out in a very tough Eastern Conference. East versus West action. This one hits home to Andy. As we mentioned earlier on, Heung-min Son joining LAFC and quickly getting his visa paperwork figured out. How that happened so quickly, I don't know. But he was able to debut in the second half against Chicago in Bridgeview or Bridgeport or wherever that is, not Soldier Field. And he makes his debut for LAFC in a 2-2 draw, and he was instrumental in that second goal, Andy. An incredible sprint late on in the match by him that drew the penalty, and Denny Bawanga hammers it home to make it 2-2 late in that match. Is it tough seeing Sonny in a different jersey other than Tottenham's jersey?
Yeah, it is. I think, he's such a legend with the club. I just love the way he always went about things and how good he was. He was just sensational for a few years at Tottenham, but you could see the kind of writing on the wall at the end of last year that he was coming off the bench, that he was a year older, he was kind of outside of the future picture for the team. So I'm glad he's able to find a good landing spot. To put a bow on your visa story, I mean, Sang Bin Jung and Ho Yeon Jung went weeks and had to travel to other countries in order to get visas finished. It's just very curious that that happens instantaneously for a superstar. But yeah, I mean, you can see he'll still see his quality that he has, and obviously he's going to be dangerous in this league.
Manny, you're involved in these. I would imagine you have some involvement in these introductory press conferences from time to time. Is there when you have political dignitaries coming in for these things, is there like a little note sheet that you hand them that's saying, hey, these guys don't play for the US. They can't play for us in the World Cup. Don't mention it because this seems the fact that it's happened twice now with big name stars coming to the US and now they've been asked questions about winning the World Cup either with Chicago or helping the US win, even though he plays for South Korea. It's happened twice. It's weird that it's happened twice. I get that soccer's not the biggest sport in this country. There's still a lot of people that have to learn it, but it's weird that it's happened twice, Manny.
Yeah, but I can't put the indictment on the clubs. Like I said, the clubs work so hard, and I got to be
Yeah.
honest, that there's such a PR machine of the clubs that they have great staff that try their best. I do think it's an indictment on still where soccer is in the country in terms of relevancy. You sign one of the bigger brands in the world, and particularly in the Asian hemisphere. Um, and it's just hard, like I said, you have these politicians that this isn't their first sport and they're not kind of up to speed on the global game and how big of a star this is. And not only that, but they don't really understand maybe the dynamics of MLS international players versus even national teams. So it's going to happen. In all honesty, I don't think the league looks bad. I think just the politician is the one that looks a little bit naive and a little bit, not understanding what type of talent and kind of brand name just came to their market.
Yeah.
In
Go ahead, Andy.
In the Chicago one, I think that one was way worse in my opinion because that was a reporter, I believe,
Yeah.
back in Schweinsteiger. And when he was asked about playing in the World Cup and taking the Chicago Fire to the World Cup, that one was way worse because the reporter should have done at least a little bit of homework to understand that. I understand that if I recall correctly, it was like a general assignment reporter that maybe
Yeah.
wasn't in sports, but still you got to do your research. And if you're going to ask that question, you have to know, your P's and Q's and your ups and downs and your lefts and rights. And he obviously didn't, and it was embarrassing for him and for my profession, and I'm getting mad thinking about it.
I love it, Andy. I love it. And skip the politician. But Andy's right, though. Like I said, the reality of soccer is, these guys think it's an easy sport to report, and they think it's just like, I'll just, kind of show up and talk about this closed system. And this sport is so global and so big that if you're going to report on it, you have to do your work. You have to kind of understand what's going on in the world, what's going on in MLS, what's going on in this country. There are tons of competitions. There are World Cups. There are not even a Club World Cup. So ultimately, it's a little bit beware if you're a reporter in soccer. But I actually, Andy, hope that gets guys excited. And I hope there's another generation of reporters that get excited about all of it because it is complex, but it's kind of awesome. Like I said, you're part of this big, massive ecosystem, which is a little different than when you report in like, especially baseball and football, which is a very closed system.
I think
Yeah.
for casual fans and friends of mine that are big Minnesota sports fans, the biggest difficulty that I see in them is just the different competitions all going on at the same time. I
Yeah.
think that's what throws people off is, oh, there's an international break. Oh, there's what's the US Open Cup? What's Leagues Cup? And they're also playing MLS. I think it's confusing for people to see that there are multiple competitions going on at the same time because like you said, Manny, they're just not used to it in a closed, here's the regular season, here's the postseason, off season, repeat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and NBA tries. They're trying with their NBA Cup thing, but that's still some of those. I think a majority of those games still count towards the regular season record. So it's not like it's a completely different competition. It's just a different, I guess, banner and bow on some of these things, trying to award a midseason trophy and not go completely different competition because I think they realize that there might not be readiness there yet with some of the American fan base that don't generally take part in soccer and are not ready for that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I will tell you about though, Jonathan, and this is to kind of go back to Andy's world, like the growth of basketball globally and
yeah,
even like the building up now of all these players, whether they're going to these colleges or they're going to the pros, it's a little beware if you want to really participate as a reporter in the NBA or in basketball now. you have to get up to speed that this is a global brand that's growing. I mean, like the Timberwolves have potentially one of the top 5 players in the world right now. And I say world because it is a global brand. And Anthony Edwards is building a brand not just in the US. So I will say, I think the basketball reporters understand that they've got to know a lot more internationally than, say, some of the other sports.
For sure. Back to the action on the field with Sonny and LAFC, Manny. From what you saw, it seemed like to me that at least in that part of the game, as a substitute, he lined up kind of up top or on the right wing because Denny Bouanga is still on the field. Is that how we see him fitting in? Is kind of a striker or on the right side of the field instead of normally where he played on the left?
I don't know. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. This is where there's going to be a moment here where a couple things. I didn't think he looked very fit. I thought the play that he got the goal on, or the PK, drew the PK, was outstanding. That's like typical him,
Yeah.
just power and speed. Other than that, I think he was still probably, hasn't been playing a lot right now, and he looked like he was still in very much like a 15-minute segment of preseason, which is early. So I'll be curious to see how he not only lines up with Bouanga and how those two play together, but again, that he can get up to speed by the end of the year and be as dominant as he has been in years past for Tottenham. So for me, it's still TBD. On paper, it looks great. The thing I love about soccer is that on paper things can be good, but the reality is you've got to put the work in. You've got to get fit. You've got to figure out how you interact with your teammates. I do think he's probably going to be one of those front three at some point. And again, it's probably a fun one for Steve Trundle to figure out how to play those two together and be impactful. But one of the things that LSU has been great at this year is their defensive just compactness has been outstanding. Adding another offensive player might take away a little bit of that kind of compactness they've had all year, where you could arguably say Bouanga was their only player that kind of got them stretched sometimes defensively. They might be adding a player now that it might not have the right mix for a while and take some time to figure out, do I put him up top? Do I put each wide, one left, one right, et cetera?
You can tell already that he fits with how they want to play this season with the counterattacking better than Olivier Giroud did, who didn't really want
By
to
the way,
make
already
those.
has 3 goals. Already has 3 goals back in France.
Weird what happens when you play him in a style that probably fits him better than the counterattacking approach that LAFC have done. I would imagine that they're kind of relying on him in France. I haven't watched any of his games over there, but I imagine that they're kind of playing into him more than they did with LAFC. But you can see how Sonny fits into this system with LAFC a little bit better on those counterattacking moments. And you could see his brain starting to work and figure out those spaces, especially on that run that drew the penalty. Elsewhere across the Western Conference this weekend, Vancouver losing 2-1 to San Jose. A last-second goal by Preston Judd seals the deal for San Jose in that one. And we'll kind of use this to merge into the Minnesota-Colorado match because drop points by Vancouver meant the Loons could have jumped up had they found a way to win. But a bit of a surprising result here for Vancouver, considering the form that they've been in for most of the season. I know they've taken a dip since the Club World or since the CONCACAF Champions Cup, but losing to San Jose on the road, always a difficult thing, especially when you go into the final stretch of the season, Manny. And you're in the place that Vancouver was in second place in the West, battling for the top spot in the conference.
Yeah, I think Vancouver probably feels a little hard done by the game. To me, it was a really soft red card they got that probably affected them not even getting a point and if maybe all 3 points. So I think, like I said, as we kind of shift to us in the West, it's intriguing because I think there's a lot of teams now grouped up in a different way. I think the East, there's a little bit different, higher level quality in the fact that there's some superstar teams in Miami, et cetera. But ultimately, I do think Vancouver is one of those teams that has done great. But I also think they're a team like us that has to figure out how to play really well at the end of the year to be impactful and to get to the top of the West.
Before we jump into the Loons the Loons Colorado conversation, obviously, as the transfer window moves on, news comes in. Lucho Acosta, gone from Dallas after what, 6-7 months? That seems a bit surprising, but also kind of fits with the persona that is Lucho Acosta over the past couple of years. Manny.
I'm going to throw it to Andy first. I'm curious what Andy says about this one because, yeah, he was an MVP a couple of years ago, and now he's out of the league.
7 months later.
Yeah, I think he kind of wears out his welcome at different places. I
Yeah.
think the writing is on the wall that he is a short timer at certain spots. I mean, he's great, but he can also be a little selfish at times, from what I hear, and we see that in the fact that teams are willing to part with him, even if he's is a special talent.
And then obviously the big news revolving the club, and Manny, feel free to sit with this one out if you want. I'll ask Andy what he knows about this. Tom Bogert reporting yesterday that the club turned down a north of $4 million bid for Taniel O'Shea from a La Liga club. Obviously, championship clubs are interested in the player in Oluwaseyi as well. Andy, what's the latest that you've heard on Oluwaseyi and potential interest overseas from him?
Yeah, a couple weeks ago, I heard that both him and Joseph Rosales will be staying around this summer. That there's been interest for both of those players, and the club has decided to keep them. They feel like they are valuable players, and I think it's maybe more likely that if they do move, it'll be in the winter. So yeah, I had heard that a couple weeks ago. I didn't hear the specifics that Ace reporter Tom Bogert had on the matter. But yeah, I think it's interesting to think about kind of what his valuation is if 4 million is deemed too low. So I put together a very scientific Twitter poll, and it looked like 70% of people thought it was somewhere between 6 and 10 million. So that's not very specific, but it's kind of double or maybe even close to triple what he's currently what that La Liga club currently offered for him.
Yeah, interesting development there, but just goes to show the the development that Taniel O'Shea's had over the past couple of years since being drafted in 2023. Manny, he has been on a rocket ship and he has put a lot of work into his game, and it's shown, and it's starting to show internationally now as well.
Yeah, it is. I mean, listen, I think he's done a great job. I mean, both for club and country over the last couple of years, and deserves a lot of the attention both for us in terms of how well he's doing and the impact he has in the field and the impact in the middle of the season when we're trying to push up the West and get excited about hopefully finishing strong in the playoffs. So I think a bigger discussion is about the timing of this is hard on a lot of teams,
Mhm.
based on we have to get more involved in the revenue generation of transfer windows because it's so important for a sustainable business model. But at the same time, this is now an argument for like, is this the right time for the transfer window for us in terms of the season when you're kind of asked to blow up your team when you're trying to win championships? So good debate, good discussion. I'm excited about all of it because it means that we're getting good players here, we're developing players, we're letting our fan base know no matter what, it's about Minnesota United, it's about winning championships, and then it's about navigating how we build into moving players on, whether they're doing really well or they're not doing well, and where we go from there. So ultimately. Just excited from whatever happens because he's been such a great steward and just it's a great reminder for any player and players out there that the attitude and belief and just continuing to push yourself no matter what's going on behind the scenes is so important, and he does that so well. I mean, really, like every game he's like, I'm going to bring my personality to the game, I'm going to bring my energy and effort. I think about that Club America game, and just watching him step on that field it really exposed a Club America team that wasn't ready for that kind of just energy. Was fun. So
You guys,
excited for the team. Go ahead, Andy. Yeah.
do you guys remember that meme where somebody pushes somebody and then they start flying through the galaxies and they, like, go across? Like that's what he did to that Club
Uh,
American defender on that first goal. Shoves him and he's still flying in the stratosphere.
That's one of my favorite highlights of the season because of the shove, as you guys say, from
yeah.
Taniel
By the
O'Shea.
way, I felt like he was trying to get shoved by the guy, and the opposite happened basically.
Oh, that was great.
Hey students, need a study break? If you got a .edu email address, we've got deals for you. Sign up for our student deals program to be notified of ticket offerings as low as $20 for various Minnesota United home games. Visit MNUFC.com to learn more. All right, let's jump into this Colorado match. As we said a little bit ago, Vancouver losing 2-1 the day before gave the Loons a window to jump up into second place with a win on Sunday evening against the Colorado Rapids. That's why for me, this is one of the most disappointing, frustrating matches of the season, where you knew you had, with just 9 games left in the season, this being number 9, the chance to make a big jump late in the season and really make this one count for something late in the season. And drop points at this point of the year, Manny, is really difficult, but it's even more difficult when there's a chance to move up in the standings and really create some space, even more space from yourself and the next tier of teams in the Western Conference, with just single-digit games left in the season. That's why the result on Sunday still sits with me painfully.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to talk about the macro part of the result, listen, I I would say it's it's really hard because obviously these games are big and you're playing against a opponent that's hungry, and they played really hard, and ultimately we didn't play poorly. We really had that game was felt like it was just a matter of time before we were going to score, and then the second half started and it kind of flipped and we couldn't quite get back into it. But before we go into the specific tactically, like my brain goes to like, yep, not a good day, but it right away switches to like makes this weekend so big. I mean, there's no hiding against the hottest team in the league now, a team that we've struggled historically, but had a great result this year, a chance for us to kind of sweep one of the bigger teams in the league. And I know we're going to talk about Colorado, but my brain can't say, yep, we got to forget it. We are a good team, and we just didn't find a way to win a big game against a team that I think had been, kind of somewhat struggling in the league. And that's the reality. That's where we're at right now. Unfortunately, we're not quite there where we're going to kind of put our thumb down and win these games. We've got to still grow as a team.
Andy, your big picture takeaways from this match, 2-1 loss for the Loons on Sunday?
I think it's like you guys have already talked about it. I think the fact that Seattle's coming into town shows how much of a lost opportunity is, because it's going to be difficult to get 3 points at home against, like Manny said, the team that is at the top of the table in Leagues Cup, a team that just put together a 4-0 win here this weekend. But the second thing is just like you said, the drop points at home, right? I think you can put the LAFC loss, the San Diego loss, the Vancouver loss in another category because those are the top teams in the league. Colorado is right along the playoff line, so that's a little bit more disappointing, and more so in the category of the drop points they have earlier this year against Dallas and Galaxy and Austin and those ones that.
Kansas City is the one you want to say, Andy. Yeah.
Yeah, Kansas City.
Yeah.
Not that you remember anything, man.
I know. Sorry.
No, all good. But yeah, I think that's just kind of something that this team has struggled with for years, is just not being able to be dominant at home enough.
Yeah, especially recently where the home form has struggled. It felt like they were turning things around, but a drop result on Sunday really hurts things. All right, diving into the tactical conversation of this, Manny, I think the thing that surprised a lot of people, Colorado changing to a 5-man backline, and that seems to be a recent trend for teams going up against this Loon squad, and really sitting deep, challenging the Loons to try and break them down. And that's something that we've seen this team struggle with time and time again. But is the fact that Colorado is just the latest team to switch to a 5-man backline when facing the Loons? We'll see what they do this weekend, whether they go back to their normal formation. But is this something that the Loons just have to prepare for week in and week out, that teams are going to set up essentially ultra defensively and just challenge this Loons team to break them down offensively?
Well, I think you have to prepare for everything in a weird way. I think again, there's certain moments where you're going to have the ball more, or you're going to be up or down in the game, or you're going to go against a team that might have just sold their best player for $8 million, so they decide to switch things up a little bit. The difference, though, this is not so tactically for me. When I look at this game, yes, they sat deep, but to me, the challenge was the first half. We still found the space. We still cut through them. We still got in the final third, and really, again, what hurts is I don't think we had like the amazing chances when you look at the highlight reel. But if you watch the game, we were in great spots to make that final pass and then score. We were in great spots to make that final cut, have a great shot on goal and score. And we just couldn't quite navigate that first half to find the first goal. And so the question for me is a little bit less about, in this game, how Colorado played. That did come to fruition in the second half where they sat deep and countered. But to me, it's a little bit more like, okay, what happens at home when we're dominating the game and we don't score? how do we make sure we keep ourselves organized and compact so we don't allow counterattacks while we're going to go forward and try to get the goal. And like I said, this game just felt like it was just a matter of time that we were going to score. And it got to halftime and we didn't. And so what's our mentality coming out? The second big thing tactically for me, and it's a tough one because I like the idea of Eric switching things up and going back to Tani and Yabo up top because that worked early in the season and kind of went away. And we just didn't score. So ultimately, that's a reality where, like, is that the right system? And there's no right or wrong here. At the end of the day, we kind of lose a midfielder when we do that. So that might actually affect both us getting numbers higher or might affect the counterattack that other teams do on us. And so I think the club's going to, or Eric and the staff are going to look a little bit more on, like, do I want to have one or two forwards? And again, I don't think one is right or wrong. And I don't think we've seen the last of Tani and Kelvin up top. I do think, there's some good debate about what are the better systems to counteract if teams are going to sit deep with us.
Andy, your thoughts on going up once again? We'll get to that last point that Manny had, because that was something that I had in my notes as well. Just going up against another team that sets up with a 5-man backline that changes things up when they come in and play the Loons. It feels like that's a growing trend among teams.
Absolutely. I think it's definitely part of the recipe to try to beat Minnesota. You saw San Luis do it. You saw LAFC do it to great success. I think Manny is right, though. I think they were able to open them up and get in dangerous spots. It felt like the ball was kind of magnetized to Zach Steffen. Like every single shot seemed like was right in his hands. So I think that was better than the San Luis game where everything was errant and off target. This was actually on target, but still not dangerous enough. So they need to find that middle ground. So yeah, I think it's something that they're going to have to continually prepare for and find ways to break down. I think to your point, Manny, about the two forward setup, given the fact that there have been 0 additions in the transfer window, I think they need to bring one of those guys off the bench to be able to change the game in the second half because currently they don't have any other attacking options off the bench. So I think in order to change the game late on, I think it's important to kind of have one of those guys be a difference maker in the second half.
Manny?
Oh, I think there's a balance there, right? Like I said, the game itself is harder to. It's easier to say that now, but I agree with Andy saying is we need to be a full team where we have a great starting group who's ready to be hungry to do well and hopefully get leads and play well. But if it doesn't, we need a plan B. And ultimately, I think this game is a good reality where I get excited because again, there's always an evolution. And this game this weekend reminded us that we're still growing into the potential of what this team can be. And we have to remind ourselves we've had a great season. We've played some great soccer at times, even with Tani and Kelvin up top, at times, with maybe more of a 4-man box midfield. So to me, I look at this game like we just got to learn from it. If these guys learn from it, we get excited for how we're going to solve problems in the future. And ultimately, it is important to have some hungry guys off the bench who can solve things offensively. Plan Bs are going to be important as we get to playoff time. Plan Bs are going to be important when other teams stop our set piece dominance, whether it's throw-ins or corner kicks, which has happened the last 2 games. So I think this is a great game for us to kind of look at, okay, we got to continue to evolve and get better at dealing with the adversity of teams reacting to figuring out how to play against us early in the year. And hopefully we can surprise teams, and again, I like I said, it's why my brain goes to excited about it, Seattle, because I think there's a lot of people where there's going to be like, oh, Seattle's going to come to town and just walk over us. This team this year, guys, has been so resilient. If you look at the scope of the full year, not just the Colorado game. And that's why I'm excited for the game this weekend, because there's no hiding. We got one of the best teams in the league, hottest teams in the league, where we have to evolve from where we've been the last 2 games back to kind of deal with adversity where we've done really well all year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how. And I know that's one of the things that has been a question mark about this team from some of the national pundits and talking heads was what the plan B would be when teams start to kind of take away those things this team specialized on earlier in the season. We'll see how that evolves and how the attacking front evolves with Tani and Kelvin, because for years it felt like we struggled to find one double-digit goal scorer, and now we're on the verge of having 2. But can you play them on the field at the same time? That becomes tricky. Then who do you have come off the bench when they're a double-digit goal scorer? Just a lot of questions and a lot of difficult conversations, obviously, that Eric Ramsey and the coaching staff will have to have over the next coming weeks as we head down the final stretch of the season. Defensively, once again, another game without a clean sheet. I believe that's now 12 in a row across all competitions that the Loons have not had a clean sheet, going back to a 0-0 draw in Vancouver at the end of May. Manny, what's different about this defensive team over the last 2-3 months than what we saw in the opening 3 months of the season?
Uh, so what was we've given up a goal and how
We haven't
many?
had we haven't had a clean sheet in 12 games, whereas the first I don't remember what number was, but we had 8 clean sheets up until the end of May, and we haven't had any since in the past 12 games across all competitions.
Yeah, I mean, I still think we've been really good defensively for the most part, but this one, I'll just go specifically to Colorado. I think this is one where, when you're at home against a team that you should beat and you're playing well, I think it comes down to like the habits individually and collectively at halftime when it's 0-0. And sometimes at home, if you're playing that well, it feels like you're actually down and not tied. And so you maybe get caught a little bit now, losing the perspective of making sure you're keeping that compactness, that kind of like just organizational where you don't allow counterattacks while you attack. And it can be little moments. Like I said, the second goal was a good example of we were putting numbers forward. We were kind of trying to keep the ball in the offensive third, but we didn't have our shape quite right. And then we lose the ball in a bad spot. And there was a lot of controversy with Will and the referee, which is always frustrating. I think that's part of it, and I'm mad at the referee. But also just the ability for them to counterattack at a time in the game when it wasn't the 86th minute. It was whatever in the 60s or somewhere.
Yeah.
So I guess for me, my answer would be it's important to keep clean sheets. Let's get after it and get back to that as one of our kind of core principles, which we've been so good at this year.
Andy, defensively, what's different for you from when we saw it felt like a clean sheet every other week from this squad early on in the season?
Yeah, one of my biggest takeaways after Sunday's match was, Eric Ramsey's usually pretty prompt in coming out and speaking to reporters, and
Yeah.
he was not there when he usually was. And it was probably about 15 minutes or so later that he came in and talked to us. And I went back into the locker room and talked to some of the players, and it sounds like they had kind of a team-only meeting to kind of discuss some of the issues that they're having and kind of do as Tani put it, kind of airing their grievances, kind of a very Seinfeld Festivus. We need to kind of clear the air here a little bit about some of the things that they're having problems with. And one of Tani's messages to the team was, we're getting beat by the same things over and over again, and good teams don't do that. I think when you talk about the two counterattacking goals, you get beat by one and then you get beat by a second. That's problematic. I think when you give up a corner kick goal to equalize to Club America, and then do the same thing early for the first goal against San Luis in a very almost carbon copy type of fashion, that's problematic. So I think there's issues that they are continually finding and are putting them on the other side of poor results. And I think they're trying to figure out how to kind of air that, figure out solutions, and not let it happen again.
Yeah, it's an interesting development. Not that great going down this part of the season, considering there's just 8 games left. But good on the players and good on the staff for getting together after a disappointing result and kind of airing things out. And hopefully that offers a reset. Hopefully that means we'll see a reset coming up Saturday against the Seattle Sounders, which is a big match for sure because of the implications after Seattle won was it 4-0 over the LA Galaxy at the weekend. They move within they move within a couple points of the Loons, just 3 points back of Minnesota United in the standings. So, and they still have a game in hand on Minnesota going down the rest of the season. So this is a big match going down to the rest of the season and standings for the Loons and for Seattle. So going back to that game back in early June, Manny, which you've referenced a couple times, the Loons got the win there in Seattle. How do they do that this weekend against a Seattle side that has been in incredible form of late? Haven't lost in the last 10 matches, 7 wins, 3 draws. Last loss was to PSG. So if that's going to be your last loss, it's a pretty nice mark on your calendar. But they've had some big wins as well. As we mentioned, 4-0 at the weekend over Galaxy, but the 7-0 over Cruz Azul that was capped off by probably the goal of the year for sure, not just in this league, but across the world. How do the Loons get back to that form that helped them claim their first ever win in Seattle this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned it does start a little bit with us reminding ourselves we're a really good team and we have a lot of good habits and we've had a really good season in big moments, and this is a big moment. So like I mentioned before, I'm actually really excited that we're this quote unquote bounce back game from a tough result against Colorado is against one of the better teams in the league. To me, means that we can't hide in terms of all the little things matter, the details matter. Particularly, I don't think it's me thinking about, oh, we have to worry about big Seattle now that they've played well. I think it's about us getting excited about what we're really good at, and that is being organized and compact defensively. That is kind of when we attack in numbers and we finish plays off so they can't have counterattacks. Ultimately, again, I think I'll start talking quickly here about some of Seattle's individual players that have had outstanding years. And surprisingly, some of these players aren't the big name players that everybody thought. But ultimately, if you're asking me about for us, it really is, kind of reflecting on Colorado and taking what we're good at and making sure we do that really well. And then being honest. Like, again, you guys talked about the areas that what were the elements and the habits that we were doing so well earlier. And we have to make sure we have a good week of preparation and we're ready to play against a good team. So, again, I'm going to be a cheerleader in a good way. They cannot have a better, more exciting game midsummer, massive implications for us in terms of it's a home game. I think we've got two more home and one away for the rest of August. You mentioned 8 games left. So it's just on all levels. To me, this is already starting to see means of like almost a playoff game for us.
Andy, your expectations for what you expect to see from this team after their first consecutive losses of the season over the past week. What do you expect to see from the squad going up against a very, very good Seattle side?
I think, when you look at kind of the frustration that was coming out of the locker room, I think that'll be channeled in a good way to bounce back. I'm sure Eric Ramsey will go back to that match in Seattle at the beginning of June. And not only that, I think when going into that game in June, Eric talked about how he felt like they'd been playing better against Seattle, kind of overall, even if the results didn't show it. So I'm sure they'll definitely harken back to what happened and what has happened against Seattle. I think Seattle is in such a rich vein currently that they're going to play their style. They're not going to come in to Minnesota, I think, and sit compact and sit back and sit with a five-man defensive line and kind of force Minnesota to beat them. I think Seattle, given where they're at, are going to go and try and win the game, which I think plays into Minnesota's hands because they don't like the ball and they want to hit on the counterattack. I think it'll kind of feed into what Minnesota does well traditionally this year, and I think that'll help them try to get a result.
Yeah, I think that offers uh, an interesting battle for the Loons. How and interesting tactical choices there for Seattle. Whether they, after seeing what the Loons did to them back in June, whether they do change things up or whether they just stay in the same form and stay with the same system that has gotten them success in recent times. Manny, you mentioned some of these guys who have been performing really well for Seattle and aren't normally the names. Danny Musovsky, right at the top of the list, one of their leading goal scorers, 10 goals, 2 assists on the season. Last time he had a double-digit league goal scoring season was 2019 for Reno, and I don't think that team exists anymore, if I'm remembering correctly. So it goes back a long way, back to the USL Championship days for him. 10 goals, 2 assists for him this season. What's been the key for his success this season? Where with Seattle last year, just 1 goal, 1 assist in 516 minutes. Now 10 goals in just over 1,200 minutes.
Yeah, I feel like he's kind of like one of your old school forwards that, all he cares about is getting in the box, making runs, trying to make sure that if there's going to be a breakdown and there's going to be a cross, I'm going to be on the end of it. If I'm going to find a garbage goal, I'm going to run across that near post. He's done a great job of stepping in for Jordan Morris and almost reminding, forwards in this league that part of your job, a little bit like Brian White, is just to always be in the box, always be hungry to find something. So a little bit like kind of an old school forward that is just always there. He's not the most athletic guy. He's not the biggest guy, but he is somebody that we're going to have to watch and make sure that we defend well throughout the game for 90 minutes. Because even one little half second losing him, he'll make that near post run and find the goal. So I think Rothrock, Ferreira, and De La Vega, we would not have said that as like the front four that would be dominating for Seattle. But all those players in their own weird journey have built solid years this year. I think Ferreira, by far, I thought at the beginning of the year, he didn't look that great. De La Vega hasn't been looked great since he got to Seattle up until this
Yeah.
year. Obviously, he had one of the goals of the year in the world. They've got Chris Roldan, who's one of my favorite players in the league, who just every game is like, you're kind of like 7.5, 8 out of 10 every game. and then his brother Alex Rodon continues to just get better and better every year. So it's one of those ones where it's a typical Seattle year where you're early on like, oh, they've got issues, it's not going to be there. You look at their roster now and where they're playing, and they're like, wow, this is a good team. And credit to them, they've built up to be a good team by this time of the year.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one this weekend. I didn't realize we were already at the stage of MLS where we're having kids of former MLS legends become stars for their teams or start to rise up and have hot streaks for
This is
their
one of my
team.
former teammates. Jeez,
Saze de Rosario, son of Dwayne Rosario, MLS legend. I didn't realize we were at that stage, Manny, already of MLS.
Oh, I did, Jonathan. You're
I get we're 30 years deep, but this man, that's it kind of hits you when you realize like, oh, we're at that stage. I know the NFL's been there for a while, and we always talk about the sons of former NFL greats playing and starring, but MLS getting their little moment now with De Rosario for Seattle. This is
yeah, it's fun. I mean, I was talking with Dwayne actually in the off season a little bit. We'd played in San Jose for several years together, and he's got another son who's a goalie, so he has two kids that are playing high level soccer. It's pretty cool, and in all honesty, he's done really well off the bench. He's kind of got that a thicker, bigger kind of body type and a little physicality. So it's somebody we'll have to watch off the bench because he's been scoring goals as well for them and kind of spot minutes.
Andy, as you take a look at this match, who are the players maybe that we haven't mentioned yet that stick out to you? I know Pedro de la Vega, I mean, you mentioned him a little bit, has gotten into some good form of late, despite a really, really slow start with Seattle when he came over. I think, what was that, last year? And it's taken him a little bit to get going, but it seems like he's found his footing of late.
Yeah, like Manny mentioned, that Golazo he had on the volley against Cruz Azul was amazing, and that was part of the time when Cruz Azul literally waved the white flag and just kind of gave up in that match. I think De Rosario had a goal in that one as well. Albert Rusnak, I think the fact that he's kind of been a long time MLS player, and I think he's got double-digit goals. I think he's a guy that may get overlooked, but is obviously high quality and will be somebody to watch on Saturday.
10 goals, 6 assists for Rusnak this season. It sets up for a really interesting, really big battle for the weekend. Loons just 3 points ahead of Seattle. So if Seattle find a way to unfortunately grab a win this weekend, they will move even on points with the Loons. I don't know what the tiebreakers are at this point. I'm just looking at it off the top of my head right now. I'm not sure what the tiebreakers are would be. Hopefully we don't have to worry about that. Hopefully the Loons can get 3 points and get back to that 6-point lead over Seattle at the weekend. A big one for sure this weekend for Minnesota United. Any final notes from you guys before we sign off for the week? Manny, I'll start with you.
No, I'll start with Andy. Jeez, I'll start with me.
Oh man, I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see kind of if they're able to get it done. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Minnesota to be able to do so, right? Are they able to bounce back from consecutive losses? Are they able to take advantage of an opportunity at home against a strong Seattle side? I think the pressure is really going to be on Minnesota this weekend.
Manny, final comment
Yeah, I
from
think
you.
my final thoughts. I mean, I'll just one of the things that we talk about the competitive side, and you're obviously you're gutted when you want to win a big game against a team that you should win and you don't. But there's also the fans. I felt like Colorado was the first game in a while where, oh, they were up for it. I mean, in terms of we just sold out, kind of standing room, great Sunday afternoon, which we don't usually play. And a lot of people are probably excited to kind of have a game end early and just not always have your late night game. And I think this is another example of like, it's about the game on the field, but it's also about like what's happened since we've joined MLS and since Allianz Field's open. We have an opportunity to have one of the bigger games in the league, the national spotlight, Seattle, Minnesota at Allianz Field, Saturday night. So there's a part of me it's about the game, but it's also like I just remind ourselves like how awesome it is that we have this amazing stadium, this amazing atmosphere, and this amazing product. It gets me excited. Like I said, there's a reality that we want it to be easy, but you're playing against opponents that want to win. And I love that for the fans. And I hope we do battle and get the win on Saturday. But I also want to get excited for the fans because these kind of games are only the way they are because of how well we've done all year, not just the last game. And that's where the guys, and I know the fans are going to be there for the guys. So, and the guys have to show up too. But I love that energy. And I think it's going to be a big crowd, and the crowd's going to show up because they know how big of a game this is for us.
Before we sign off, I want to get one prediction from you guys. U.S. Open Cup's quarterfinal play tonight. Philadelphia, New York Red Bulls, making this one up after the first attempt at the game suffered a torrential downpour, which ended up in Philadelphia's field looking like a lake. So they pushed the game back to today. So what's your prediction, Philadelphia or New York to face Nashville in the semifinal, the eastern side of the U.S. Open Cup bracket? Andy, I'll start with you.
I think Philly. I think just given their overall quality, I think they'll be able to get it done. And I think they're probably going to be the biggest challenge facing Minnesota if they're able to get past Portland and reach that final. I think they're going to be a daunting team if Minnesota is able to get it done.
Yeah, fun one to keep your eyes on. I think it's got to probably be Philly's going to be a favorite, and I do think Philly will find a way. And it's exciting to watch the other side. Like I said, they've got Philly and Nashville and Red Bulls are all really good teams. I think Philly and Nashville are probably a little bit a notch above. Certainly, we've got to take care of business against Chicago to get there, but it is a good one to keep your eye on. Correct, you're right about that, Jonathan. So there's some strong teams coming out of the East for the Open Cup as well.
Yeah. The semifinal for the Loons coming up against Austin on September 17th. Looking forward to that one at Allianz Field with a chance to host the final if you can move on to the final coming up in the beginning of October. Looking forward to that. Hopefully a trophy in the future for Minnesota United. As we said, as we've been previewing, Minnesota United hosting Seattle Sounders this Saturday at Allianz Field, 7:30 p.m. kickoff over on MLS Season Pass, as well as FS1. You can listen to the pre-match show and the broadcast with Dan Terrar and myself on 1500 ESPN, starting at 7 p.m. pre-match show, 7:30 kickoff for that one. Andy, appreciate you stopping by. Appreciate you popping on the podcast. Go read all of his work over at the Pioneer Press. Go follow local reporting. It is important, and we appreciate you stopping in today.
Thanks for the plug, Jonathan. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks to the production staff of Grace Dearson, Kyle Hayward, and Evan Entler for putting this on every week. And Loons fans, we'll talk to you next week.